Much ado has been made in the past few months about censoring controversial opinions on social media and various other content platforms. Be they crazy conspiracy theories about using horse dewormer to cure a novel coronavirus, to why America was really in the Afghan war, all the way up to a resurgence of Christian morality on porn sites. That being said, I've noticed that as time has gone on, more and more nuanced opinions are starting to develop, and it just seems like the left and right lines are breaking down more and more, as individual people find themselves committing to a lot of infighting over smaller issues on one point and bigger issues on the other. It's kind of like you see a nice soft piece of wood at the eye level, but then as you zoom in real close, you get all the different scracks and cracks that happen with the micro level. That being said, I decided to throw in a few of my choice controversial opinions that I personally have and see how people feel about them. Please understand that these opinions will of course be entirely YouTube safe. The more glaring content issues I have are going to be kept to the wayside, but feel free to react and feel as you will. I thought this would be a good idea since I myself am a bit of a controversial figure. I'm a man of many masks. Whether it's Joyous Papa Song, the nice, happy to meet you fatherly figure who gives you nothing but praise and positivity, to the King of Feathers, the raunchy, sneak around, stab you in the back, brutish rogue type that's known for information gathering and retrograding, all the way up to Zale Song, the asshole, the person who essentially treats debate like an artillery barrage and your ass is getting the paddle. That being said, here are my top 10 controversial opinions, and no, I'm not going to be changing my mind anytime soon. Opinion number 1. Old people should not have access to computers. Alright, let's be fair. Old people can have computers if they can prove they're smart enough to use them. Just the same way we ask for a certification for a gun or a car, old people can be outright dangerous when given access to a computer. 2016 Trump elections? Mostly caused because old people didn't understand how Facebook worked and would believe complete and utter conspiracy theories as fact because it popped up on their MLM page. Speaking of MLMs, the biggest contributor to MLMs, which are basically just Ponzi schemes, it happens through social media by older people, typically aged 40 to 65. You know, the wine mom demographic. But let's not just put this on the old people alone for being incompetent. Oh, no. The number one target for hackers and ransomware advocates is old people. Mainly because they don't understand how social security systems work, and it's very easy to scalp them from information. Not to mention, old people are the number one reason why every year we have to watch TV where people tell them to don't tell people your social security number. If you see a text message or a phone call from Amazon that says you made a payment for an item you didn't get, don't believe it. It's just so terrifying that these people are so dementia-ridden and addled in their brains, they can't see an obvious scam when it pops up. It's to the point now where scammers don't even have to try. There's no covert meddling, no secret account names, no numbers like that. It's pretty much just a text message with a link to the Amazon page. You click it, and the next thing you know, all your account information has been downloaded. It's just that simple, and they keep falling for it consistently. Not to mention, old people aren't interested in taking computers and learning about them. If old people were trying to learn about computers and then use them for their own ends, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But all too often, old people just want stuff done for them. Can't get into Google? Call your young nephew to come over and show you how it works. Can't figure out how to turn your smart TV on and off? Call up my daughter in the middle of a work week to ask her how it is, and then gaslight her when she refuses to teach you. That's the problem with old people. They put unnecessary effort and emotional labor onto other people to show them how to work a computer without actually learning how to fix it. Now, I would be okay if old people got computers if they could prove to me that they knew how to work the computer to within a normal degree of a human being. I'm not asking for them to be code savvy. Or alternatively, we should probably just produce a line of computers that are really, really rudimentary, that cover the basics, Googling stuff, handling some photos, maybe typing up a text document or two for their inevitable will. But outside of that, no, I don't think old people should be allowed to use a computer unless they can open a PDF on their own. Coming in hot and heavy with number 2, banning characteristics of guns or gun characteristics doesn't actually solve gun control. Fun fact, I actually find myself on the side of the right-wingers and the 2A morons a lot more often when it comes to gun control. Because let's face it, banning high-capacity magazines doesn't really work when you can take 2 standard magazines, duct tape one to the other, and now you have 60 rounds on backup, which is pretty much the exact same effective rounds you can get out of a 75-round drum magazine. Saying you can't have a short-barreled rifle because the barrel is 14 inches or less just causes a lot of people to make 15-inch barrels and then tuck them into the side of the gun so they can conceal them all the same. let's be real here. All the different changes that California and a bunch of other predominantly left-leaning states have made to guns really hasn't done much to curb gun crime, because there's just too many right-wingers in right-wing states that can transfer them over. There's way too many loopholes, and anytime you cut it in a system, there's always some asshole in the free market of gun components who will make a weapon that's just skirting the rules. Can't have a rifle with a 14-inch barrel? Aha! This is a 14 and 1/10 inch barrel. It's not technically shorter than 14 inches. It's just way too easy to get around that kind of stuff. Not to mention, the real issue with guns, and I do mean issue with guns as in shootings, mass murders, just general shittiness with firearms, treating it like it's your penis, that is entirely with gun culture and the gun nuts, the ammo-sexuals, the people who decide to go out and buy a $200 AR-15 from Walmart and then spend the next 7 paychecks kitting it out to look like they're some type of gravy seal or backyard weekend warrior. Not to mention, a lot of these changes that a lot of states make to guns require people to get conversion kits that actually make the guns unsafe. Can't have a pistol grip and a separate stock. Gotta put this weird flappy panel thing between the pistol grip and the actual rifle butt, and as a result, the gun is just unsafe to fire. Now, some morons will go put this on there and then fire the gun, and next thing you know, someone's getting hurt, and it's just another statistic. Instead of trying to cut down guns or make certain ammo types be illegal, or all these reflexive reactionary tactics that just are proven not to work in the long haul, or can easily be countered or figured out a different way, politicians should come up with ways to actually solve the issues of culture, gun safety, and reaching out to people who are suffering from these issues and have to turn to firearms as a sort of masculinity. In all actuality, the problem with guns has less to do with the actual gun as a tool and more to do with, the misfiring in the male brain. Number 3. Fictional movies that end with, "and they all lived happily ever after," are just better. Like, they just are. Nobody wants to watch a movie with a sad freaking ending. Or at least happy sad endings, like the end of Lord of the Rings. In reality, a lot of ways people end movies is pretty much a giant clusterfuck unless it's executed properly. But there's just nothing to be wrong with, "and they all lived happily ever after." Think of it this way. How did a lot of movies end in between the 2010s and 2020s? They were sequel baited. Pretty much every single movie tried to end with some sort of sequel bait, and those endings were awful. The whole idea of after credit scenes that got popularized originally with, I believe, Pirates of the Caribbean, but has been completely monopolized by the Marvel movies, is utterly insane. They're so focused on setting up the next movie, you forgot to give your current one a proper ending. And to be fair, a lot of movies should kind of be like songs. You have an intro, a type of chorus or a killer hit, a center for a build-up, and then some type of lulling period before the climax, and the climax ends very emphatically. If you have a movie with a bad ending, that is to say a sad ending where the heroes don't win, it's kind of just a dreary movie. It just leaves you depressed. And not to mention, movies with unsatisfactory endings are basically just a cinematic version of a ruined orgasm. Now, this is not to say you can't do a sad ending with biographics, or historical films, or films that have a generally grim, dark tone. Obviously, it'd be weird for a grim, dark story to end with, "and they all lived happily ever after." I understand that. But for the most part, some of the best stories end with, "they all lived happily ever after," and you can't tell me wrong on that. And I guarantee I'm going to get a lot of neckbeards running around here saying, "Well, there's no philosophical musings to be had with, and they all lived happily ever after." Of course not. There's not supposed to be philosophical musings. That's what happens in the middle of the movie. The end of the movie is supposed to be the wrap-up. And I'm sorry, but you just can't convince me that there isn't any better wrap-up than, "and they all lived happily ever after." Opinion number 4. Social media influencers should be taxed and billed as if they are advertisers, not contractors or artists. Now, depending on state to state, this is really where this comes into play, but let's be real here. Instagram influencers or social media influencers, whatever you want to call them, influencers, I guess, really are just extensions of an advertising company. They get paid money to promote a product. They haven't actually tested the product. They have no idea how the product works half the time. They're really just showing off a product and giving off a script. And usually the information is stuck at the beginning of a video that you're forced to watch. Otherwise, you have to skip over it. And let's be real here. We skip over influencers showing products a lot to get to stories and the actual content of videos unless we're explicitly looking for that. In which case, again, they're just extensions of advertising companies. Hell, most advertising companies don't even shill out themselves as an advertiser anymore. They just hire influencers to do it, and that's solely based upon who's the prettiest and who gets the most views in the most amount of time, which isn't a bad idea. The issue comes about, though, is these people are listed as private contractors in most cases, which means the advertising company can pretty much write them off as an expense, they don't have to pay the same titles, and they're not held to the same standards that other advertisers are doing. I'm serious. Go watch a lot of the number one influencer advertisers for makeup brands. You're going to notice a lot of really strange rules that we've kind of made advertisers agree not to do. So I just say, let's just call a spade a spade. An influencer is most times just going to be an extended of an advertising company. They're not actually testing the product or doing reviews of it, so you can't really call them a contractor as if they were reviewing the product or testing it. They're mostly just reading from a script. And at that point in time, what's the difference between an influencer talking about their top 3 different makeup ads to a bunch of 12-year-olds and a commercial at the Saturday Night Football game for Cialis? Opinion number 5. Gonna get a little dark here. Members of the KKK or known neo-Nazi organizations should just be jailed on site for being members of the group. The KKK do have card-holding members, they have union dues and stuff like that, and most neo-Nazi organizations do have a listed roster or some type of dossier of their various members. And let's be real here, it's only a matter of time until a KKK member gets up to some sketchy shit. Yeah, okay, sure, you're supposed to commit the crime before we arrest you, but as far as I'm concerned, the KKK is by all means a domestic terror organization by every standard of the law, except for the federal level. I believe the FBI is still on the fence about them. And neo-Nazis are a straight-up terrorist organization because we went to war with fucking Nazis. If you're hanging out with guys who used to gas and exterminate people and have still stuck around 70 years after their leader blew his brains out, you're probably not a good person. Not to mention, pretty much every single Aryan nation or neo-Nazi has been to prison at least once. And the only reason the Klansmen get to stay out of the prisons most times is because their uncle, brother, father, Billy Joe Danny Frank, is the sheriff of their podunk little bumpfuck town, and he's not going to arrest them for anything major. Let's be real here. While the KKK have been a bit more subversive about how they go about things and have a bit more deniability, more times than not, they're just waiting for the opportunity to go terrorize some poor black family that's moving to the suburbs. And while the Klan isn't running around in sheets and burning crosses, and while the neo-Nazis aren't marching in lockstep with their hands out, they're still up to some shady shit 9 times out of 6 on a given Sunday. So let's just cut the shit. Defer them as a terrorist organization, lock a lot of motherfuckers up, and let's put them to work rebuilding the ghetto. I would like nothing more than to see... They can even have their own uniforms. I'll let the Klan wear their robes into the prisons, and then when they go out to the ghettos to pick up trash and clean all the graffiti off, everybody can know they're helping out the community. They won't mistake them for just some random white people trying to gentrify the place. Number 6 is by far one of my more popular opinions when I actually tell it to people, but it does get a lot of pushback. I believe government officials who don't support a legislation should have to defend why they don't support it in the public eye, and those reasons have to be printed out and put out into the public in some type of congressional meeting minutes. And not just vague reasons or general gesturings. I mean, they have to get into the gritty. Far too often, congressmen are just allowed to vote yes or no on a bill, but they don't give a reason why. There's a lot of bills that come out there that are ironclad, and there's been plenty of studies, tell-alls, and exposés about how half of these governors and shit don't even read these bills to begin with. They just have some lobbyist come in and tell them, vote no on this bill, and then they leave and give them a stack of cash, and then they get to watch a football game because technically they talked about business for 10 minutes. Let's be real here. If our elected officials are supposed to be legal scholars and constitutional analysts and historians and greatly well-educated people, it should be no problem for them to actively defend a little bit of scrutiny on a bill they're supporting. After all, if you're supporting a bill, you've probably read it, know about it, and looked into it, and would support it. And honestly, if you're going to vote no on something but have no idea what it is, then can we really trust you making an informed decision? And yeah, you could say that a lot of plebs don't actually vote whether on party lines. They don't go and research their candidates. They mostly just walk into a voting booth and hit D or R. That's because it's a general Joe Schmo, not someone in public office. Our public officers are supposed to be well versed in the laws and the legislation they're pushing, not just voting yes or no based on who popped a stack of cash and a hooker on their desk last night. Not to mention, it would be really funny to watch people like, I don't know, the governor of Florida, or Matt Gaetz, or Boo Boo Boebert have to explain why they don't support the Green New Deal. I guarantee they would just come up with conspiracy theories and bullshit, which would go a long way for basically recruiting ads. It could also be used against these shitty stand-in Democrat politicians who just sit there and toe progressive lines when there's a photo op, but ultimately vote the same line as Republicans. If they're voting no on a bill, they have to explain why. If nothing else, it would cause the lobbyists to have to give out a set of scripted answers for these people to tell, and then at least we would know which sides of the aisle and which candidates have been supported by which people based upon the very general-based answers that they're giving. And if all else fails, it'll just demonstrate how little our congressmen actually want to do their jobs when there's just the basest level of scrutiny in their reasoning. Opinion number 7. Themed radio stations are bad, and radio stations should be allowed to play whatever music they want without having to pay for copyright or licensing. Let's be real here. Radio stations are pretty irrelevant with the onset of Pandora, Spotify, and other music playing apps. But for a large section of the country, and a lot of people with older cars, the radio is still the main modus of entertainment while you're making a long road trip. And let's be real here. When you're listening to music on the radio, it's free advertising for that song, that artist, what have you. And music companies have gone a long way in their archaic and prehistoric levels of thinking to make sure that only certain songs and certain radio stations are played in certain areas of the country. Ever wonder why the Midwest has so many goddamn country music songs? Well, that's because a lot of people out there have thought that country music appeals to them because it's so pandery. I live in Washington State in Seattle. One of the big things about Seattle is we have a lot of foreign music channels. We have a Native American channel that does news and current events. We have a Latinx or Latino radio station for a lot of workers listen to. We have a Korean or K-pop type station, which is really putting out some bangers as of late. And we have a couple of pop music and even some hipster channels. But if I go 30 minutes east into Over the Mountains, I guarantee I'm going to get a lot of hokey-dokey country music and a lot of Latinx music just because of the migrant workers and farm bases. That's specifically done by population and listening tactics by music companies to see what songs get where. And this is purely so they can push their shitty pandering music. We all know country music has basically just turned out into a Budweiser commercial with lyrics at this point in time. But think about this. How many times has someone made you listen to a song from a genre you've probably never listened to on your own, and you're like, damn, this is a banging track? Now imagine that if we amplified that across the entire airwaves of America and allowed younger, newer artists to get their music out there versus having to let only the American top 40 pop hits play. Hell, in some places, they're not even playing new music anymore. Because certain music stations are so starved for content that they can get licensing for, most times they just replay old tracks from 7 and 8 years ago that were pre-recorded. There's a classic music station out Pacific Northwest ways that does exactly this. They just replay old broadcasts from 7 and 8 years ago and just hope no one notices. And at one point in time, someone brought up the fact they were doing this, and they were just like, that's just our thing now. So hell, let's cut the bullshit, allow radio stations to play whatever they want, allow them to have actual music choice, not just themed radio stations, and let's see how many country folk actually kind of enjoy power metal, or how many rap artists really appreciate, I don't know, what music do white people create? I think we just steal music most days. Oof. This one's gonna hurt, but this one goes out to all the gamers out there. Game companies should be allowed to brick or deactivate your console for a set amount of time if you use racial slurs or threats over live chat or game text. Now, we already know that the technology exists for gaming companies to record matches and record audio calls into a database. Granted, there's millions of gamers playing at any one time, and there's numerous languages, but for the most part, if someone is going to be committing it once, they're going to be doing it multiple times. And let's be real here, gaming is pretty fucking toxic. And that's mostly because the most raunchiest, nastiest, annoying people on the internet have been given full anonymity and high-grade machine guns. That's why it's almost impossible to enjoy COD, because you can't play in a single match without getting someone calling you the F slur, the N slur, the T slur, the D slur, or any other number of slurs. Hell, they got slurs I don't even know about anymore. I don't even know what it is. I get called something, I'm like, is that an insult? I really don't know. And I think that gaming companies should use their overarching monopoly power and completely monolithic control of the gaming industry for some good for once. You got some raunchy dude bro who drops the F slur on somebody? Brick his Xbox for a day. Let's see how much shit he's talking when he actually has to appeal for the consequences of his actions. How about you go and call someone the F slur on a text chat and send it to them, and they might actually be trans or in the closet or something, and it really degrades them and makes them feel depressed, and they don't want to play the game. We just lost a gamer and potential customer. So how about you take that other guy who took away your business and brick his Xbox for a week? Or his PS4. See how much shit he's talking when, he can't play his game. Now, before we all go crazy, keep in mind that other companies do already do this. On Twitter, if you talk shit and drop a bunch of slurs, they lock your account down for a week. Granted, you can still use your phone, but you can't get into Twitter until you agree that what you did was wrong and you're going to take a break. Not to mention, people being overly nasty when they have anonymity is really just a result because they have no recourse. Look at 4chan and 8chan. And here's kind of my rule with anonymity. If you can't handle being a decent person when you have complete anonymousness, you shouldn't be allowed to be anonymous in the first place. If your whole reason for going behind a mask is so you can be an utterly shit person and just completely get rid of the fact you have an id, maybe we shouldn't let you behind a mask in the first place. If nothing else, I would find it really hilarious to see a lot of these 7-year-old and 10-year-old white kids on Fortnite or Warzone who drop the N-bomb like it's going out of style, just getting locked out of their PS4 for 10 days or a week. Then when their parents come home and they want to enjoy a nice game of Call of Duty or Cabela's Big Hunts on their PS4 after a long day at work, and find out that the console just doesn't turn on or won't connect to the internet, their kids get to explain to them why. And hopefully then some parents will actually teach their kids that's not okay to drop the N slur, or at the very least, we're going to get a lot of fun YouTube compilations of pissed off gamers getting butthurt because they dropped a slur and actually had to deal with consequences over the internet. And now, for my final controversial opinion, a sort of internet socialism, you might say. I think that YouTube should stop putting people on its promotional page that have over 1 million views. Hell, I don't think YouTube should promote anybody who has over 500,000 views. Here's my reason why. YouTube is pretty much controlled by media companies at this point in time. It's not based upon actual game traffic. Hasn't been for a long time. I could argue it never really was. That being said, people who have over 1 million views on any one video are usually getting those views because they make content that's super advertiser friendly and YouTube pushes that to drive more adverts and drive more engagement. But those really aren't the people that need to be getting 1 million views or 2 million views. Music videos that have top hit tracks by the actual company are allowed to have tons of ads. But if you make your own YouTube video with your own content for a music video that you think fits better, you get slapped with an algorithm that just basically tanks your channel, or at least tanks the views, or makes it virtually impossible to find unless you search every single word exactly how it's spelled. But what about YouTube being a platform to promote content producers, as they always claim to be? Shouldn't the people who have less than 1,000 views or 10,000 less views be promoted on YouTube? A sort of YouTube hidden gems type deal? Shouldn't people who have a lot of likes on their videos versus dislikes get more promotion than people who just happen to have user-friendly content? And let's be real here. If you have over 1 million views on your channel, you're not going to need any help getting advertisement. You're probably going to have a super huge community base. You probably get a shit ton of money off of ads. And really all you're doing is soaking up what other YouTube content creators could use. Personally, my channel's not very big. I get that. I'm really waiting for one of my videos to break 1,000 views, and I'm going to celebrate with that. But the number of subscribers I have, my little 50 subscriber family, and the some 2,000 views I've accumulated directly means a lot to me. And I know that YouTube doesn't like my content because I talk about controversial stuff. I'm not saying that I have to get YouTube special promotions, but there's a lot of young trans creators out there who don't get supported because trans inclusivity just isn't marketable to people outside of the month of June. Or how about all these small-time video essay people that try to produce content about subjects that are interested to them? They don't get noticed because no one really interested in it. But I bring the same point back to people who don't ever listen to music outside their genre. You can find some straight-up bangers out there. And if YouTube continued to promote younger, smaller creators that have newer channels, you never know who's going to be the next 1 million subscriber base. And that just adds one more to your docket. YouTube should be more about cultivating smaller channels into bigger channels to drive more traffic to them than giving people like Logan Paul, who arguably should be introduced to the concept of waterboarding, more views and more clicks. Especially since Logan Paul's pretty fucking creepy when it comes to little kids, not gonna lie. Not to mention, most of the YouTube content that's out there right now that's on the big promotional channels is nothing I can't find on other channels or other producers. YouTube has a very unique style of having the market cornered on user-generated content and being able to make complete millionaires. When I was a kid growing up, being a YouTube star was a joke. If you said you had a YouTube channel, that was just opening yourself up to ridicule. Now, there are people who make entire livings off of YouTube and Twitch. And the fact that they're more interested in promoting channels that have a lot of clickbait or a lot of sexually explicit exposure or a lot of channels that already have millions of views to start with, instead of giving the little guys a chance, is really just handicapping themselves and discouraging smaller creators from getting up and going. And if they continue on this road, I guarantee you the only people who are going to be able to get big channels on YouTube are people who start the game with a lot of money, a lot of equipment, a lot of skill, or a lot of corporate backing to begin with. So, there it is. 10 of my controversial opinions that are still fairly safe for YouTube. Tell me what you think. Respond if you want. I would ask only that people kind of keep this somewhat civil in the comments. I am completely standing behind these opinions. If you have direct challenges to me, feel free to take the words I've spoken as gospel, and if need be, we'll hash out the differences on the specifics. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you all. Hopefully I'll get the next episode of the All-American Nightmare cracked out soon. Still got to finish out a few more things. Decided to take a month off for some mental health and schooling stuff, but I'm glad I'll have you here, and thanks for coming by. See you soon, and may you all live happily ever after.